It says 10 minutes there, but I'm only going to speak for 5 because I know we're all excited to see Mike speak next, me too. So we'll get into it. Okay. Sorry, there we go. So I'm not a founder, but what I've done over almost 10 years now is worked with companies such as these. So I'm a lawyer, but through my experience working with these companies and a lot more recently, a lot of startups as well, I've come up with these 10 tips for today. A lot of it will build on what Lachlan just finished off here. So tip 1, ideas time. Let's go through it chronologically. First of all, what to do when you've got a great idea. What we see is that a lot of startups are pretty sloppy with corporate governance. And so when they come to investors looking for money, there's not the right documents in place. The company might not be registered. There might not be good enough minutes from board meetings. You're not including things like actually following through when you promise that shares are going to be transferred. So all of these things, which require a lot of commitment at the start when you're at that ideas phase and you want to be doing other things, these are the types of things that really help you in the long run, making sure all these documents are covered off. Protecting your IP. Lachlan just spoke about IP assignment in his last point. What that refers to is making sure that your company actually owns the IP that you're using and not people who have helped you to develop it along the way. So of assignment to make sure that those who have helped you actually transfer the ownership of the IP to you, and then you need to make sure that you've got the right protection for your IP. There's different ways to protect your IP depending on what type of IP it is, and that's where the lawyers help you out. Tip 2, co-founders. So you've got a co-founder, what do you do? As David was just mentioning, co-founders are great, and it's great to have 2 people working together, but you need to be really clear from the beginning who's going to do what and what's going to happen in case the thing falls apart. We see 2 ways of doing that. One is to prepare a shareholders agreement. That's a more detailed document that sets out exactly what's going to happen, especially if the company falls apart, but also what's expected in the meantime. If you don't want to spend the time or money preparing a detailed shareholders agreement, you at least need to have what's called a heads of agreement, which can act as a legally binding agreement, but just sets out the key points that you'll be governed by. Okay, you're starting to commercialise. You've started working on a product or a service offering. What do you need to do? You need to make sure that your interests are protected commercially. Speaking to a lot of founders, common piece of feedback I get is that early on they were just so keen to get things going. They signed agreements without really engaging lawyers to review them, these long-term agreements, and now they find that their business is actually hindered by being stuck in these long-term agreements, and they come to us almost to look for advice to get out. It's not always easy to get out. In fact, it's usually really tough. So it's another good idea to, before you start signing up these commercial agreements at the beginning, to get some legal advice there. Understanding the regulatory landscape is important as well. I had one founder say to me that they found talking to regulators sometimes like talking to old people at a barbecue. They can be really friendly, but they just don't understand what it is you're trying to do. And so lawyers can help. We deal with these regulators all the time. We know what they expect. We know the language they talk in. And so engaging in that regulatory education can be really important very early on. Next, get ready for funding. So early funding rounds can be simpler, but as the previous 2 were just saying, it's still important, really important, to have a good pitch or presentation prepared, to have a good subscription agreement or shareholders agreement prepared, because what it shows is that you're professional. You've thought about these things, you're ready to go, they'll know what they're getting, you'll know what you're getting. And so you also need to think about the types of shares you have on offer. I'm not going to bore you talking about what these different types of shares mean. A lot of you will already be familiar with them, but these are the types of things you need to think through when you're getting ready for funding. So the business is growing, you get moving premises and employing staff. You need to think about what type of premises you want and making sure that legally you're protected around those. Do you want to get your own premises under a long or short-term lease? Do you want to go into a co-working space? There are some fantastic co-working spaces at the moment. Is that where you want to start off and then move on? Whatever your plan is, it's an important part to get legal advice on. A good employment agreement for your staff is also critical. That needs to cover a range of things and protect you, your ideas, your IP in case staff move on. And so that's important as well. And then the ESOPs as well, a really critical part, something that's coming through in the innovation boom. Need to make sure that's covered. All right, you're going out to market. Things to consider. Are you selling online and via mobile? Do you have your website terms and conditions all ready and done? How are you presenting your information online? I deal a lot with the ACCC, that's one of the regulators I deal with, and they often have concerns about the way information is expressed online and on mobile sites. And so what you're offering needs to be mobile friendly as well as desktop friendly, and you need to have the right terms and conditions in place. Privacy is a huge part of that, really important. Specific requirements need to be there. When you're dealing in peer-to-peer sharing economies, the level of information that's now being exchanged is a lot higher than what it was in the past, and so you need to make sure your privacy terms and conditions and your policy is robust. Consider your distribution networks as well. This is a really important point. As you grow, as you employ, as you engage and reach agreement with a range of distributors, you need to think about what your distribution policy is. Are you giving people exclusive areas? Are you going to have your distributors competing against each other in selling your products? And you need to be very careful about how you all discuss price together. Okay. So what to do when you need more funding? Do you need a disclosure document? Well, what can happen here is that it will depend on the number and type of people you offer shares to. So if you don't want to go through the burden of drafting this detailed disclosure document, you might get some legal advice about how you can still get the money coming in, but avoid going through these onerous obligations. You might also want to seek legal advice about what to do when investors seek to impose their veto rights on you. You want investors to come in, obviously, but at the same time there needs to be a balance and you need to protect your rights. Finally, if your business isn't profitable and probably won't be for a while, you need tax advice. It's better to deal with this up front than deal with it later on, which is sometimes what happens and where we get asked to come in and give advice when it's been done after the fact rather than having the right tax advice from the beginning. Going global. So this is a key part of what we as Australian startups look to do now. The message is go global. There's great opportunities for us out there. So material tax issues arise when going global. So again, it's something you need to get legal advice on to make sure that when you do go global, you're doing it correctly. There are Australian restrictions on offering shares to foreign investors, so you need to be aware of those. And finally, ESV CLP investors are only permitted to invest in Australian businesses, and so it's early stage venture capital, limited partnership investors, and so you need to be careful about how you engage and what role you will look for them to play, how big an investment you want them to take. So things are going well, we hope they're going well, and you're looking at exiting. So the legal implications for you will depend on the type of exit that you're looking to make. So there's usually two types, a share or asset sale, where you just want to sell your shares or the assets, sell the business to someone else. So in that type of scenario, you need a sale agreement that protects your interest in going forward and what role you might play. Some of the purchasers might want you to hang around for a couple of years after you've sold the business to them. Others may be more prepared to let you go because they've got a great management team in place. But what you want to make sure is that the agreement that you've got, that you're about to sign, adequately protects you, and so you've got lawyers on hand to ensure that that's the case. That agreement needs to be detailed and it needs to be balanced. Floating, so if you do have an IPO, you go down that path, as a lot of you will know already. Any prospectus that's associated with an IPO needs to be 100% accurate. You need to make certain statements in that prospectus, and there's really serious obligations if the information is incorrect or you've made the statement without doing all of the things you need to do. And so it's really important that your IPO is done correctly. And finally, found, learn and repeat. So if you exit and you do well and you start up again, that's great. But if you fail, rather than go through an IPO float, at least you've learnt, and you can seek legal advice about the learnings that lawyers have had working with other startups, so that when you come around again, you're not afraid. There's a lot of talk about the fear of failure in Australia and overcoming that fear of failure. Making sure you have these protections in place and that you learn from any failure you might have had is a great way of ensuring success in the future. So that's it. Thanks very much, everyone.